gas being something that really shocked everybody. Donald Trump back again in the White House, not just trying to, run things down in terms of climate change, but actually cancelling climate science. Can you believe it? I mean, shutting institutions like NASA Goddard Center and other places, and forcing many scientists to actually flee, including to France, where they actually created a program of these scientific refugees coming from a world now that was so radically changed by the man in the White House. And also Truth Social being used as a way of attacking Europe and our values and our understanding of what the 21st century needs, which includes, of course, renewable energy. On the other side, we have China. I mean, this is complex, isn't it? It's a complex relationship. I mean, China's been supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. And yet at the same time, it's become the world's green energy superpower. And we're all pleased by that, right? So this is a complex relationship, which Europe, I know, is trying to calibrate right now. We also have in Europe all these contrasting worlds that are out there right now, and all these different pressure points being played out in this bloc of nations in Europe. We have caused by some politicians and backed by, apparently, some sections of the private sector for Europe to water down another flagship program, which is the European emissions trading system, right? Where does that come from? And I mean, is this again a part of disinformation which is sweeping the world, fueled by many of the social media channels, where you have something like X, or Twitter as we used to love it, with 50% of the conversations bots talking to bots? I mean, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? So then we have other voices, and let's be really honest about this. We look at the current conflict in the Middle East, and the shutting of the Straits of Hormuz and the fossil fuel supplies there. And some people say, well, that means we need to go digging again for more fossil fuels. But no, many other people in Europe, and in fact the majority I would say, are saying actually completely the opposite. And I think it was very important that the European Central Bank made it quite clear that fossil fuels are really now a macroeconomic risk to the economic stability of Europe. And I think this is an important voice, and this is a courageous voice as well, in a sea of doubt that is being created by others. Just to say finally, I'm going to be in Colombia in a few days' time, in a place called Santa Marta. Anyone know what's happening in Colombia, Santa Marta, very shortly? You? Yes? The first phase, the first transition, as it were, conference to phase out fossil fuels. You know, in Belém at the last UN climate conference in Brazil, that over 80 countries said that they want to phase out fossil fuels, including this country of Germany. And at least 45 are going to be in Santa Marta next week and for several days to work out how do we actually, as economies, phase out fossil fuels finally. It won't happen overnight, but this is also a light in maybe some of the darker areas. And just to wrap up, we also have a new word, fossil inflation. Have you seen this word going around, fossil inflation? It's a new English word. So, I mean, the world is very exciting right now. There's a lot going on, right? Some of it good, some of it bad. But we've also got a new word, fossil inflation, and that means even linguists and crossword puzzle people can join in this kind of debate. All right, let's bring on board our wonderful guests. It's free seating, like EasyJet or something. So let's have Natacha. Natacha, I'm a good British person. I always mangle people's last names. Faullimmel? Faullimmel. Okay, come, join me here.
Thank you very much.
You are the Single Market Officer. Single Market Officer. Does that mean you're single, or does that mean there's only one of you in this office? You're the Single Market Officer from DG GROW at the European Commission representation in Germany, and you're an expert on the clean industrial deal. So fantastic to see you. Let's also bring up to the stage our other guests, Yvonne Zwick, who is the CEO of BAUM. I joked that that was some sort of tree organization, but No, it's not. She's a European, or you are a European Climate Pact partner from Germany. BAUM is Europe's largest sustainable business association for future-orientated economic development with 750 members from industry and in the service sector. So you're a big organizer. Yes. All right. We can do it. All right. Yeah. And then we've got Dr. Christopher Reyer. He's a scientist from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. And he's going to share some findings on an EU Horizon-funded research project on critical intervention points for European adaptation to cascading climate change impacts published in October 2025. What he's going to talk about basically is how climate change impacts hitting around the world actually cascade into, in a sense, the daily lives of Europe. So this is an important topic too. So again, we're not an island. Let's just remember that. Okay, so let's press on. The Clean Industrial Deal. It's about competitiveness. It's about decarbonizing. It's about promoting circularity, which has been a dream for a long time, having circular economies. And it's about reducing raw material dependencies, because Europe has some raw materials, but it doesn't have all the suite of materials we need for the transformation. And how do we make the most out of the limited resources in the EU? Yeah, okay. So please, tell us a little bit about this Clean Industrial Deal and how it's going. It promises a €100 billion market, 500,000 new jobs by 2030. What are the goals and what actions are happening? And just, yeah, what's going on? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Maybe just one point quickly. So the Commission, we don't create jobs and markets on our own. We create the enabling structures and the enabling systems for this to actually happen here in Europe. So with this point, the Clean Industrial Deal is very much the Commission's response to these three crises that we're seeing and that you've described quite well already this morning. The climate crisis, concerns around our competitiveness, and this urgent need to boost our economic resilience. And I think what we see today, every few weeks we can talk about new geopolitical tensions. This is really driving the point home that we also need to think about this decarbonization journey as part of boosting our resilience here in Europe. And so concretely, the Clean Industrial Deal is a proposal for building a business case in Europe to support decarbonization. And as Barbara was saying earlier, the Commission and the EU is really standing its course on this vision that decarbonization is an opportunity also for our economy, for our businesses, and for our citizens. And so I'm going to describe maybe a little bit what we mean by building a business case, because that can maybe sound a little strange in this context, but basically we're looking at three things. We're looking at inputs. So as you've rightly mentioned, access to critical raw materials for our strategic technologies in clean tech, for example, batteries. We're also thinking about closing the loop in Europe, and that's our upcoming Circular Economy Act, where we're going to look at things like joint definitions of what counts as waste so that we can actually have a coherent single market. And that's where the single market comes from in my title.
It's not a market for singles. No.
It's not a market for singles. It's a common market that can help us grow in Europe. And then we also look, because we also see that circularity, for example, is a huge opportunity to develop new business models, new jobs, new talent, new skills in Europe. And that's also an opportunity on the job creation side and in making new and interesting jobs in Europe. The other point for the business case is also looking at demand. So it's wonderful if we can create a lot of new batteries and solar panels in Europe, but if there's no demand and no one buying these, companies need some investment security. They need to know that there's going to be a market for these low carbon products that they're going to be investing in. And here the Commission is saying there is a role for the public sector to de-risk and to create some of these lead markets for these companies that are taking a risk, innovating, looking for new solutions, developing new business models. And so that's something that's quite at the heart of the Clean Industrial Deal as well. We call this lead markets. And then, of course, we look at funding and financing opportunities because, of course, public money is not unlimited. We have a lot of different priorities that we need to focus on. So we want to create the frameworks that can really de-risk and create opportunities for the private sector to also come in. So that's the business case story in a nutshell behind the Clean Industrial Deal.
And there were some headline numbers here, which about the number of jobs that could be created and other things. Is the clean industrial deal? Would you say it's on track, or I interviewed Jürgensen, the Energy and Housing Commissioner in Berlin, and we were talking about, in this case, not the industrial deal, but the tripling of renewables by 2030 and the doubling of energy efficiency by 2030. And Jürgensen was quite candid. He said, look, on the tripling of renewables, we're going to over exceed. We're really going to high performance here. Energy efficiency, always a bit of the Cinderella, the Aschenputtel, as you say in Deutschland, one energy efficiency, but there's a big push on that right now. I see a lot of communications coming from the Commission on that. So it's okay to say that we're not sure if we're going to reach all the headline numbers by 2030, but it's better to reach 90% of the numbers and no numbers at all, you know what I mean? I mean, are we confident that the Clean Industrial Deal is on track to deliver something really profound? Maybe that's the way to put it. Do we feel confident?
I think the way you put it as well in the introduction, it's somehow becoming a bold statement even to say that there's an economic opportunity in this decarbonization process. And I think the fact that we're staying steady on this point is already going to help deliver on or create the certainty that we're trying to build. We're not going to change. We might be tweaking a little bit to accommodate on some, pressures. I mean, energy costs are through the roof, so we also need to take this into account. But the vision and the sense of direction is there. Then have we delivered? I mean, the Clean Industrial Deal is only a few years old. If I tell you, I can list everything that we committed to say and where we are on every one of them. We track progress very seriously, and we take this very seriously in the Commission as well to say, we promised that we would be working on funding and financing. What have we done in the current budget that we can find flexibility, for example, on leveraging the EIB and making it easier for them to focus and refocus investments in the renewable energy sector. But of course,
you said the EIB? You mean the
European Investment Bank, sorry.
Yeah, that's important.
Sorry, acronyms.
No.
European Investment Bank.
Yeah.
But we've also made a new proposal in our next budgetary period because, of course, our budgets are also linked to a broader negotiation to introduce what we call a European Competitiveness Fund. And that's really looking at the innovation journey from the start, the idea that's being developed, to deploying this idea and scaling it up in Europe. So it's a kind of, we're starting, we have the ambition and the tempo, but we also need to make sure that all our instruments are aligned to do that. And that's maybe also what takes time. And in the face of also huge pressures within Europe and outside.
Yeah, huge pressures which were not foreseen. I mean, there was a former British Prime Minister who said, what's the difficulty of being a Prime Minister? He said, events, dear boy, events. In other words, you plan something as a government and then something happens, right? Like a war, which you didn't have in your plan when you actually launched whatever it was you were launching. Maybe just we look at jobs. I don't know, maybe that's possible. Because, for the ordinary people in Europe, and whatever an ordinary person is, I don't know what an ordinary person is, but for the people out there who are not in this room living their daily lives, I mean, there were a lot of jobs lost, actually, in between 24 and 25. And how do you sell the Clean Industrial Deal when people go, oh, we lost our jobs, maybe it's not working, right? Probably that was an event, something happened, right? Was it the war, was it this, was it that? But do you think we can generate the jobs that we need, actually, also politically, for the European project across Europe?
I mean, jobs is a very important and key part of how and why we talk about the Clean Industrial Deal as a business case story. It's about who's creating jobs. It's not the Commission that's creating jobs. It's not really the public sector that's creating jobs. It's creating opportunities for new businesses also, and new businesses also means disruption. New business models also means disruption, and I think on the one hand, we are taking it very seriously to accompany regions, localities, places that are facing maybe some deindustrialization due to decarbonization, coal and steel regions. That's been a long-standing priority of the Commission, and that's something that we have dedicated programs to look into. That's part of our regional cohesion development work. We also have something called the Globalization Adjustment Fund, so that's also looking at jobs that are lost. I mean, regions come to the Commission or to the EU and also say, we've lost a significant number, we've had a structural change because of jobs that have gone abroad. And you mentioned earlier, you know, China sees the decarbonization agenda as a growth agenda. And some of these jobs, I mean, solar panels, solar energy is one area that, you know, some say we have maybe lost the edge on this. So yeah, jobs is at the heart of why we're working on this. Then on job creation, that's also why we are on the EU level doing what we can to support the innovation side. Then you make it easier for new business models to emerge, make it interesting and easier to have access to skills, because access to skills and a mismatch between the types of jobs that are being created, maybe some fear also on the types of jobs that are going to be created around, you know, more automated factories, etc. This is something that we are also looking into. But of course, I mean, the Commission doesn't create jobs, and a lot of this work is to be done closely with the member states of the EU.
No, I think it's true. The European Investment Bank is doing a tremendous job right now, and they're now working very closely, I think, in terms of funding many small and medium-sized enterprises to actually embrace certainly the energy efficiency revolution, which many small and medium-sized enterprises were not embracing because it was all a bit too complicated, right? They just want to make products or deliver services. It's difficult to think about energy, right? But now there's a whole new thing called energy efficiency as a service, where you don't actually own the energy efficiency goods or machines or whatever you need. You just get the thing installed for free, and any money you save, that's where you pay back the loan. So it's a different model altogether. It's a bit like, you know, getting a miles car, right? You don't own the car, you just get the service of driving around in the car. That's good. Let's come to Yvonne Zwick at BAUM. From your perspective, what does a truly clean and competitive industrial deal for Europe need to deliver beyond the decarbonisation targets?
Well, it's mainly what was said already by the representatives here by the EU Commission, that it does not only have to stay a target itself, but it has to become a full economic transmission strategy. And what makes a strategy? If you ask companies, it's about measurements. How do you want to step forward to reach your targets? And it's also about transparency, which was also mentioned already. Transparency about which targets do you reach easily, because these are low-hanging fruits, because you run through open doors. And where do you have the hurdles to overtake? Where are the restrictions, for example, where you don't have the direct influence by yourselves, which Natacha also outlined already pretty well, that she doesn't create the jobs, but it's the companies themselves that do it. And as such, I love the idea about the Green Deal and the Clean Industrial Deal, because it's about marketable options and also market-based incentive schemes, which are put up in partnership between the policy sector, administration, and the private sector together. And that's where I'm engaged in, and I'm always looking about how can we scale up solutions that are out there already. Sometimes it's via communication. I'm not an industrial representative, I'm a theologian. But I see what engineers, for example, show as a pride about a solution which usually is better than the prior technical solution or industrial solution that you have, because it's a question about engineering capacity. What is your specific purpose as someone being in the automotive sector, for example? It's not delivering a worse car than the last one, but a real good one. What is it about in creating infrastructure for transportation, because the basic need is not to have a car, but to be able to decide by yourselves when you want to head off for a city, make your bargains, or meet your friends, or meet your company partner whenever you like. And that infrastructure has to deliver the solutions for auto mobility in terms of I want to be autonomous in deciding when I want to come from A to B. And when we create the smart mobility mixes and logistical mixes with shipping, aviation, individual transportation, which is often with lorries or cars. I'm coming from a rural region myself, so it's just in Berlin that I don't own a car and come here by bike. But I know what is about when I live in the Black Forest, for example, or I'm a world champion in an industrial respect when you are in global business community. So when we look now on the scarcity of resources and the rising prices with the Strait of Hormuz issue that we have, and I think it is interesting that some people even applaud to this situation because it is clear right now what the solutions are in becoming autonomous as a European unified energy market, for example, where we may have different strategies as member countries, and we may have different speeds and strategic approaches, but it's important to keep the targets upright, to become the most competitive, climate-friendly, fair and inclusive economic region in the world. That is what the Green Deal was all about. And now we have to adjust sometimes the measures that we take when it comes to energy pricing and energy market design and promoting what we have to reach as next level of energy supply. But I think we have to consider this as a unified European Union, which allows to diversify the strategies on national levels. And the last thought that I would like to contribute is, when I was in German stakeholder dialogues from the perspective of being engaged or working for an advisory body to the German federal government, I often learned we only have in German the Mittelstand. But when I was in talks with other European countries, with MEDEF or with industrial associations in Greece, for example, we consider that time, or also with chambers of commerce in the Balkan region, I often learned it's not only in Germany that the Mittelstand is the backbone of job creation and creating pride for what I am doing as a pro. But we have to strengthen the Mittelstand in each and every country in Europe, because we have the luxury suppliers in Italy, for example, or we have the great pens which are designed in UK, for example, which we would like to allow in the European market, as well as affordable PV, for example, from China. Why not? And we have to create a European public for all of this. And what I would like to empower is getting knowledge about best practice in the whole of Europe. What is done in business, what is created, invented, and scaled up, brought onto the markets in Europe. And this comes together now again with the thoughts of Natacha. We have to strengthen the internal market in Europe, because this is also a strategy of avoiding the big tax burdens that we have on global markets right now. We had the scientific findings that a fragmented European market equals 45% of tax. So if we unify the European market and strengthen small and medium-sized companies in all European member countries, we can strengthen the economy and as such the benefits for the people itself. And I think people will become proud of European Union.
These are all good points. Maybe when we talk next about affordability and energy, we can maybe also reflect that not everybody, there's some people out there where the polarizing goes on is, well, you know, I can't get my grandma to a proper doctor on time, and yet you want to, you know, decarbonize. Well, decarbonize later, you know, find the money for my grandma to get to hospital, right? So how we actually communicate all this stuff, that it's not sort of oh, you can have this, but you can't have that. It's about how can you have it all, in a sense, but in a sensible way within the economic boundaries of the country, right? But I also would challenge that assertion that some people have, which is that we're somehow poorer. We aren't. The world is never been as rich as it is right now, if you look globally. Never been as rich. It's just lots of money is sitting in bank accounts, earning interest, watching these wars go on and thinking, I'm not going to spend it on investing in a transformation of the economy, right? This is the big challenge.
Yeah.
And also the big challenge is governments don't have as much money as they used to because we've allowed the big businesses not to pay taxes all around the world. And governments are not as rich as they were 40, 50 years ago to actually choose where they spend the money. So these are, we can maybe talk about these later. But one last point back to you, Yvonne, is what does BAUM actually itself, the business network, concretely, I shouldn't say concrete, should I? Green concretely do to, you know, forge this transformation?
We are doing a lot of practical work. So we are bridging, for example, what the EU Commission is all about in thinking about sustainable finance and bringing this into business dialogues with financial market actors and real market economy actors. And we are doing this in platforms that we build, in events, for example. We have in Saxony the Sustainable Finance Forum Leipzig since 5 years, discussing on how we can transpose the sustainable finance agenda into real practice by public banks, for example, with Sächsische Aufbaubank, which is the regional player, likewise European Investment Bank. And we have such players everywhere, and bringing them together with real investors, with funding angels for startups, for example, but also with established industrial companies, which are also looking for fresh ideas and for smart opportunities in reaching the next level of business making. And maybe I take your example with the grandmother once more. If we don't talk about how can I bring the grandmother to the doctor, but how can I use the technique that we have already to bring, for example, a digital nurse or a digital doctor or a digital advice to the people, and then we have the networks that bring the grandma in case of urgency to the place where she is cared for in an adequate manner, then we are talking about a health system again, delivering the services the people need with this level of technique that we have right now. Because we claim to keep to the old business cases and the old ways of thinking. But what I like most is the scouting attitude that I sometimes find out there. If I ask open question, so what do we earth with scientific finding, for example? What is the sense of urgency that we have on the safe operating space with regards to planetary boundaries? And we have the same with societal boundaries. We have to create trust again, that everybody is willing to contribute the best he and she can and will do if she is allowed, or the company is allowed, to find its own way to deliver, for example, for climate targets, as well as prosperity targets that we have as regions, as communities, and also as nations. So we do mostly connection work of companies across sectors. We do a lot of translation work, also physically, that we take English texts and translate them into German, a very basic barrier for small and medium-sized companies in Germany, not to be able to really run through the English texts, which are sometimes not only 2 pages long, but a bit longer. And we build platforms for pioneers and best practices, and try to invite mainstream businesses to follow those examples and learning from them, and really being open for those ideas and experiences, where we know since 42 years, as BAUM was founded in the 80s, when I was 8 years old. So we have decades of learnings about what communication is working, how can you evolve convincing examples, and what are also the limits when you try to know it better than others and they have the feeling that they are numb. Nobody wants to feel that way. But how can we open up the spaces for learning and evolving sustainable, regenerative business practice? That's the main issue that we do.
Good. We're now moving to our second topic, which is the one that seems to be very exciting topic right now, which is energy affordability. So the EU has this Affordable Energy Action Plan, which is part of the Clean Industrial Deal, and it offers a set of concrete short-term and structural measures to provide competitiveness, affordability, security, and sustainability for citizens and businesses. Natacha, how does the EU Affordable Energy Action Plan help the industry, the economy, and the citizens in Germany, for example?
Thank you. So as you mentioned, affordable energy is a key building block of our Clean Industrial Deal. And I think even prior to the kind of shocks that we're seeing, we've known for some time that access to affordable energy remains an issue both for companies and for citizens. And this discussion around energy poverty in particular and energy vulnerability is something that has been looked at for quite some time on the Commission level and also with the EU member states. So as you said, the Affordable Energy Action Plan has both short-term measures and long-term structural reform measures that are more about making sure our energy system is resilient, there's more electrification, we can absorb more energy produced from renewables and or nuclear, depending on the energy mix in the different member states. And I think that's also an important point. A lot of the work on energy is done very closely with the different member states. So we, again, create the enabling forces. We also provide recommendations and guidance. We were talking about learning. I think that's also something that we do very much at the EU level, which is what works in some member states and what could be interesting and relevant for another member state. So for example, we've done this big study on competitiveness and resilience in the EU, and we found that those member states that have more renewables in their energy mix tend to have also lower energy prices. So that's something that we then share with everyone. We cannot mandate anyone to have a certain energy mix, but we can share this information and make sure that this is taken into account when we are discussing topics like affordable energy. So one is completing the energy union. This is the structural reforms. The other is, of course, we've discussed it earlier, but attracting investments and ensuring that we actually see the delivery of projects. And that's something we've been paying a lot of attention to as well, which is this issue of supply and demand that I was talking about a little bit, which is, on the one hand, we're developing our ability to produce renewables, for example, in Europe. But are we able to absorb them, and are we actually investing in the projects that are local, that are maybe decentralized, that can actually generate some sort of certainty and affordable energy at the local level? And that's a question, of course, when you're coming from the EU perspective. We're working with different partners on this, and also the banks, the investment institutions. I think that's important to bring them on board too. And then another big part of the work, and that's something that you see kicking in now, is being prepared in times of crisis and coordinating our approach to managing our gas supplies. I mean, now we have maybe this slight privilege that we're entering the summer, but after the summer, we're all the different member states are going to be looking at their gas and oil reserves. And how do we do this? How do we learn from the crises? I mean, from Russia's invasion, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and the weaponization of access to gas. How do we learn from this experience and then prepare together as the EU? And that's also something there to buffer these huge spikes in costs. And maybe one last point on energy poverty and vulnerability. I think there's also a lot of guidance around taxation and state aid that's more in the hands of the member states, of the countries, in terms of maybe loosening some rules to make sure that we target support to those who really need support. And that's really, you were talking about transport, and some people need to use their car in rural areas. We need to think about how are we designing measures that can reach these people, and how do we learn from how different member states are working on this to actually have an impact and not just have guidelines that are not useful I think
I mean,
that's something.
perhaps first we celebrate how much renewable energy we do have in Europe, right? Which is, and actually worldwide, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's doubling every 2.5 years. I mean, renewable energy is the #1 energy installation now. It's not fossil fuels, it's renewables. We know it's overtaken. We know the prices, in theory, are very low. So actually there's some really positive stories in the whole renewable energy story. But as you say, the affordability is what challenges the public's mind. How can it be that we're paying so much when we're being told there's so much renewable energy? And that seems to be 2 or 3 issues here. One is, how do you price energy? Do you price it at the renewable price, or do you price it at the gas price? That's one thing that's happening in some parts, and certainly in the UK, they're pricing it at the gas price, and the gas price is quite high. So nobody's seen really the benefit of the renewables in terms of affordability. And then the other thing seems to be that we've got so much renewable energy, but we don't have enough storage. And therefore, we've had negative prices in Europe, I think, for a few times in the last 3 or 4 years, which means that the people that do the renewable energy are not really making any money, because somehow the governments or the commission or whatever didn't have enough grid connectors. That was the first problem, to connect all the renewables. And now the issue is, how do we store it? So we've got battery coming on, that's quite good. But we need the next step, don't we? Long duration energy storage. And then maybe the jigsaw puzzle is complete. Then maybe we do have the perfect clean energy system. Anyway, let's see. But Yvonne, you come on to this topic because it's so interesting. How can renewable energy not only contribute to climate goals, but also strengthen Europe's energy independence and economic resilience in the current geopolitical context? How can we do that?
Well, directly connecting what you outlined, if we enable regional energy grids, we create stability. And if we do that, we also create regional value creation, system value creation, because you have the prosperity if you have the energy market that is really contributing also, for example, for stable public households, for example, which we learn in communities in Germany already, where renewable energy contribute to the public spending again, so that, for example, public entities can be heated, the lighting, and everything is organized by this. Then we can also create energy for the industrial sites as well, and so the companies can profit again from this. And so resilience of energy systems create resilience and of the communities themselves, and we have an investment security for companies, for example. If we have the infrastructure for renewable energy and storage, then that is the next logical step, that companies will invest into that as well and get connected to this, to those smart grids or be part of it. And that lowers risks for the companies and lowers also the negative impacts, which is active risk management for companies. And if you overcome your conventional risk management and become more active and more proliferating and contributing in a constructive manner, then you can create opportunities and raise business opportunities for your company. And I also experienced by some BAUM members that they enlarge their own business case in becoming an energy supplier, for example. But I also hear from the cases where a regional government, for example, does not enhance a renewable energy net, that they won't invest into this because they see that the bureaucratic burdens are hindering those investments and that the costs are above the investing side, and they won't become productive for their balance sheet. And that's, of course, not leveraging the opportunities of the Green Deal. That's quite the opposite. But we also see that it's really a political issue whether you support it because you learned about the opportunities and see it in the numbers and see your strategy as a politician yourselves or as an administration, and then come into dialogue with the companies how you can safeguard those risks, above all in stressful times like we have right now. It's better to have the solutions in place than become an activist anti-renewable energy, for example. Because I think it's logic that they will evolve.
But Yvonne, is this national governments or cities, national governments, or is it the Commission? Where's the bureaucratic block? Is it different policies in different countries still on certain things that are
And
making
down
it
to
more...
lender level, of course.
Yeah.
We have the fragmentation not only in Europe, we have it in Germany as well. And we see, for example, that on lender level, we had some newspaper stories last year in Handelsblatt, for example, where they saw the winning regions are Sachsen-Anhalt, Sachsen, Thüringen, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, not Bavaria, not North Rhine-Westphalia, not Baden-Württemberg, because they have not expanded the renewable energy in their energy mix.
Right.
And that makes something with, for example, investors putting industrial sites in the regions. And we see that in Saxony, in Sachsen-Anhalt, in Thuringia. The industrials like to go there because the energy prices are low and they can become connected to the energy grid and become a contributor to the energy system and earn money with that. So that's a whole other story. And it is the same with water, for example. We have an issue with drought in Germany already now again. We see it in the newspaper. Time's up and we don't have time. We don't have the water storage in the grounds and we have to establish the water cycles as well. And when a city or a community has the entity that organizes closed water loops, for example, for cooling industrial processes, then this is a real advantage to advertise, come here and invest in Germany and some regions in Brandenburg, for example. And later on, it is interesting to see whether it is really practice and what the impacts are, or whether we create new conflicts between, for example, private households in contrast to industry. And we have experienced that with Tesla, for example, very prominent example. And we see that
Sorry, who?
Tesla.
Who are Tesla?
Yeah, that weird guy that doesn't like
they are?
biking but going skyrocketing rocketing on Mars. But this is really funny because even in the sustainability niche, we had that believing thought that Elon Musk will do it everything. But I think we have to go down from the fantastic ideas to down to the ground, real impactful business cases, for example, with where the small and medium-sized enterprises have the technology in place to create energy out of rubbish, for example. So what we have in Back to the Future, there are some companies in Germany that have created the Fluxkompensator. And so it's hydrothermale carbonization, the whole system that we have. But scaling this idea up, that's the point. How do we get to that? And because this is not sexy, and sometimes the owners of those companies, they are not media compatible, or, well, they don't like to go, for example, on stages. What do we do about that? And how do we create the public for such kind of companies?
Yeah. Good point, Yvonne. I'm just going to push you a little bit here because, Natasha, you wanted just to comment, I think, just briefly there, yeah?
I just wanted to jump in on this to say, I mentioned, there's a huge effort on having this European approach to building grids, interconnectors, etc., to make sure that we can also, benefit from renewable energy installations in the Nordics or in Spain, etc., etc. But the other thing that we're looking into is seeing who is experimenting already locally. And that's something that we've put, for example, we have this concept called net zero valleys. And that's very local, very regional. There's one actually in Brandenburg and at the border with Saxony, Lausitz. What we're looking there is giving some room for a bit of experimentation and saying, we're going to make permitting easier for your renewable energy installations. We're going to make it, we're going to try and help you through access to funding, make it more interesting for a certain company, whichever it is that fits in our net zero objectives. We've identified certain technologies to produce, for example, some elements of the battery supply chain in this sector. So we're trying to also have this mix between keeping this EU coherent way of doing things, but also making sure that experimentation can happen, that we can learn what works and what does it look like. And maybe that's going to give ideas to other parts of the EU, other parts of Germany, other parts even of a region to see, look, that worked and that actually wasn't that much more expensive for the public administration there, or it wasn't so complicated to do a procurement call here. And actually, because we're called a net zero valley, this kind of seal of recognition has meant that we're more attractive for some other companies that share this kind of wish to move forward to come. So that's also a way of balancing a little bit this, coherent approach and also learning from the ground, because I don't think anyone claims to have all the ideas and all the perfect solutions that fit a context. I think that has to also come bottom up.
Good. I think we can return to this maybe towards the end when we're going to have a little wrap-up session, but I think it's beyond due that we invited our third guest to speak, Dr. Christopher Reyer, who's patiently sat here, and the clean industrial deal may not be your bread and butter over breakfast every day, but science is. And science is our North Star and our South Star in this whole story of climate change, decarbonization, and also social issues and all the other things. There has to be good science behind it, so it's fantastic to have somebody from the Potsdam Institute here with us. Chris, I think I can say Chris, thank you. Yes, I know the other name, but I'm not going to use it because that's a family pet name. No, there's no prizes for that. Our supply chains are interconnected, and they are vulnerable. They crisscross the world all over the place, and we get global shocks like war, of course, but also climate change is like a mini war happening every day, isn't it, in many parts of the world these days. And this can result in water problems, food shortages, economic crisis, blah, blah, blah. You do work on what we call the cascading climate change impacts. Tell us what these are and why we should pay attention.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation and also for the nice introduction. And actually, I think it matches quite well, or it complements quite well what was said before. Because for the clean industrial deal and the energy affordability and what you just discussed, you mentioned you need the rare earths, you need the functioning connectivity, and that's where the cascading impacts really come in, because what we observe in the past and what we all know, our systems are connected, and historically the science has focused a lot on the impacts occurring in one side and then what to do about it. And the side can be a region, a country, it can be the globe, yeah? But what we haven't focused on so much is how they actually trickle from one region to another, from one sector to another, from across a river. It doesn't need to be a country, yeah? It can be a very different entity. So we call them, in a way, transboundary impacts, cascading impacts, trickle-down impacts, and they actually can move through many more things than just the supply chains. I mean, since COVID and all these things, we know about the supply chain risks, but they equally propagate through the financial system. And the financial system actually was most of the time concerned with the transition risk, so with the risk of countries, companies, and everybody basically moving away from fossil fuels to clean energy. So that's what we want. But for many companies, as we know, that's considered a risk. And there was very little dialogue with these companies possible, if you remember, how things went the last 10, 20 years in many ways. But when we integrate actually the climate impact side, so this cascading effects, yeah, so then actually the financial sector is very attentive, because many of the actors, they don't know where they actually invest, and they don't know if a flood has hit a factory, if that actually affects their portfolio or not. So in that sense, it's a bit an eye-opener that these cascading impacts or climate impacts in more general actually also matter for financial systems and so on. And then last but not least, we have the human dimension. So climate impacts affect people in many ways and in different regions. And it's not only, let's say, about indirect or direct triggers of displacement, migration that we are all aware of, at least since the Arab Spring, for example, which was an amalgamation of really different factors. And that's what it's all about. That these cascading risks, they act on complex, interconnected systems where there's not a single easy pathway through, but there are really a large web of interconnectedness and a web of systems that then in the end generate these events. And they can go until, you know, like black swan events or how they are called, that you are really have not even thought about that they could happen. Yeah? And so were trying to really dig a bit into those examples, or try to find examples on the impact side. For example, there were the floods in Thailand around 2012 that were basically hitting one industrial park. So the area was very confined, yeah? But that's the industrial park where the chips for the hard drives that were used mostly in Europe were produced, and the chips that were used by the Japanese car industry. And then it starts to really grow. And we also have the floods in Pakistan at the same time. And we have actually a breadbasket failure in Ukraine, Russia at the time, which all, you know, then led to an interruption of the supply chain system that could be felt until the UK, where more people had to visit food banks to sort of stack up their supplies. And this is all, you know, already old. This was before COVID and before now the recent wars that we are having. So now these systems are just more brittle and more interconnected, and the issue of cascading risks is just growing in attention everywhere, basically.
Do we know, Chris, like how much Europe is dependent on stuff coming from other parts of the world? Do we have any ideas?
There's of course, the field is so large, right?
Yeah.
We know from the import of raw materials to some very high-level aggregated products, and of course it gets more and more complicated. But for many of the drivers of the economy, for example, and this is pre-COVID still, for example, and also the Russia's war on Ukraine, is the energy war, and that's why the energy connections, and that's how it also connects to your sort of more focused points on how to achieve the transition and so on. So we know a little bit about what we need and what we get from where, and we also know the agricultural trade system quite well, and that's another actually a hallmark of these cascading impacts, because they can either come through impacts occurring in one place that then affect the trade of whatever, wheat and other stable crops that then affect food security elsewhere. So they can also affect the security situation within a country itself. So if you think about a country living on subsistence agriculture, then a drought in that country can immediately affect social relationships and power dynamics, leading to maybe security
tension
and so on.
Possibly conflicts, yeah.
And that's a whole other effect of the cascading or of the climate impacts on agriculture, which was there initially, as opposed to some place where, well, then the economy is affected because trade is affected and crop prices are affected.
There was in December, again in the UK, I don't want to keep mentioning the UK, but it was a unique experience because scientists were asked to come and brief British politicians on the climate impacts on the UK right now and what the climate impacts will be over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It was called the National Emergency Briefing. It sounds so bizarre that it's never happened before, but it's never happened. It's never happened that the scientists have talked directly to the politicians about their country that they're supposed to be managing. So it wasn't about the Amazon, it wasn't about Africa. These are all very important places, right, for what's going on with climate change. But it was trying to get home to those politicians that have to make a decision in the UK about the future of the UK, what they need to know. And it was very powerful. And there was one chap from the University College London who is a doctor, and he's an emergency doctor, and he said, what terrifies me for my son is not that dengue fever is going to take over the UK or that another infection. We'll kind of work that one out, yeah? What terrifies me is that people are going to starve en masse. Because when the climate impacts get so hard, the UK won't be able to feed itself, and it won't be able to import the food from elsewhere because everybody else wants to import that same food. In other words, the food story was the climate impact that this scientist was most alarmed about. And I don't know if that echoes with you a little bit, because, okay, we can do without certain things, right? We can still survive, but we can't survive without food or water, right? We have to have water as well. Is that, what do we do about this, Chris? Because this is the key question. What do we do about these shocks, and how can we minimize them? Obviously, we need to deal with climate change. That's number one, but what else?
No, the nexus idea, and so that things are interconnected and that there's a food, water, climate, energy nexus, for example, that's a totally right approach. And then we have health coming in, and health is actually the hottest topic, I would think, at the moment on the impact side, because it intersects so much also with other solutions like healthy food and a healthy planet and all of this. So when we talk about the solution side, I think it became very clear that it's very difficult, because these effects are so dispersed, and we really need a good understanding of the actors first, and then what is the sphere of influence of the actors. Because, I mean, many people can only influence what is around them, and then you have international organizations. They can maybe organize rules and regulations for trade or for financial systems. So it depends very much on the sphere of influence of let's say, the people concerned, and on how they can deal with that. And then some generic principles for dealing with these risks and for adapting to them is in the first place to sort of embrace the complexity and know that you own a risk, so that you are a risk owner because you are actually concerned. And with these cascading risks, many people actually don't know, because you wouldn't think you are concerned of something happening elsewhere in that specific way that you are being formed. So you need to own the risk, and then you need to understand that even if it's a local UK example, you need to assume let's say, the global responsibility of the whole issue, and that it's not only relating to mitigation, but really also on the responsibility on the environmental standards and on many other things that influence these cascades at the moment they happen, and also in making the systems more brittle and more vulnerable, so that they can actually take on, let's say, a chaotic course. Better governance.
No, governance. Just mention that.
Because we have, and that's maybe also relevant here, we have a lack, or we of course, everybody knows, and politicians are paying attention to this, but because of the way we organize our political systems and everything, there is still a risk of lack of coherence across policies, because we have one DG maybe doing a policy that makes totally sense in their perspectives, and then another DG proposes a related question. And this resonated actually a lot with the Commission. This policy coherence, because they know, of course, about institutional coherence, so across institutions that are working on similar or related topics, or even not, but then they still should be talking to each other, but also vertical across, let's say, the EU down to the member states, down to the local companies that are then maybe implementing something. So this political coherence, in a way, is a governance issue. It's nothing new, and it relates to many other things, but it really helps to understand these cascading impacts. Because on the one hand, for example, we are having development policies in Northern Africa to support their local agriculture. On the other hand, we are supporting them to provide tomatoes and lots of high-value fruits and vegetables to import to Europe, which will give us, very nice food in winter when we cannot grow it here. But of course, it worsens the water situation and many other things there. And it's a bit similar, for example, for artisanal fishery. policies that support local fishermen and so on. And at the same time, we have a large fishing fleet, and these things, and you know, some of the member states are very
Yes.
fond of their
Spain.
fishing fleet.
Yes.
So those are all things that people are aware of, but the policies are not always coherent. And
So
yeah.
let's just two things. So I mean, there's two sides to this cascading story, isn't there? The one side is how does Europe itself make itself more resilient to shocks that might happen elsewhere, but also shocks at home. So do we have the right kind of agricultural systems, for example? Do we have too much livestock? Do we need less livestock? I mean, these are kinds of options that, but they're difficult politically, right? Because people say, don't tell me I can't eat meat. But anyway, you know what I mean? It's really difficult, right? But then we have the cascading effects outside. And let's talk developing world. I mean, the United Nations still says developing and developed. I hate those two terms these days. But maybe less rich countries. And yet at the same time, we all think that we can't afford to send as much money abroad as we used to, right? And America has completely slashed its overseas development aid. I mean, is this false economics? Because, you know, if we rely so much on the rest of the world, are we actually cutting our own noses to spite our face? You know what I mean? Does this come into your work? Are we actually underfunding those countries that really need it for their own fighting poverty and not falling into terrible situations, but also we need them as well for our own supply chains?
No, I think it's not let's say
A marginal topic.
A marginal topic or anything, because as I mentioned briefly earlier, we have to assume these international responsibilities, and we are just not living in a neutral world where, you know, not some countries and groups of countries have stronger positions than others, and Europe has such a strong position in general, and also for other cascading impacts that affect other countries. This is a very relevant aspect, because it's very difficult you know, we have this divide between, well, we need to mitigate, and that's very important, and that should be our mantra. In my talk later, I will also show you to some extent why, because some of the impacts, we just don't want to go in there, yeah? But then we also have the adaptation side, and on the adaptation side, there's actually a lot that can be gained and get, you know, transformed simply in making our world also in a way a better place. And for that, I think we didn't do the economic assessment and all the individual steps to really see if an adaptation euro spent in sub-Saharan Africa pays off economically, but in a sense of addressing risks and addressing, for example, displacement that then can lead to further security issues and whatever. And even if those are false claims, you know, then still you can address the issue better in those countries themselves than by spending a lot of euros on what we do at the moment, protecting the borders and whatever. Yeah.
Okay. One last point to Chris, and by the way, I don't know who's keeping time on this thing. I mean, we could go on for hours on this topic because it's so interesting, but I realize that other people have other things they might want to do. Where are we standing at time-wise? We've got 5 minutes more. Oh my God, we're only this far through the story, right? Okay.
You can open.
Wait,
I made most of my points. So
I think you've made a lot of good points there, Chris. So. Let's maybe just wrap up here. We've got 5 minutes left. So I think what we've learned from this is that Europe is holding course on the clean industrial deal. It's got lots of pressures on it to maybe retune, recalibrate, whatever, but it's holding firm. This is about courage. We need courage from business as well, because they're the ones that actually have to, you know, in fact, in a sense, realize the clean industrial deal. You're setting the conditions to make it happen and recalibrating when people find problems. So that's why the European Investment Bank has been quite useful just recently with certain investments they're making, and so on and so forth. But that actually there is also a bigger world out there where we've got climate change. It's not going away. It's not going to go away. You know, we've got the 1.5 degrees centigrade safety target now fully at risk. And so climate change is only going to intensify. We need to invest in resilience abroad, but also at home. There must be things out there that are gaps that we still need to fill, right? We kind of touched on those a bit with renewable energy. I think this storage story is really important right now. This long duration energy storage is really important. Incidentally, there's in China right now, and also in the UK. My God, why do I keep mentioning the bloody UK? But they have just been given the green light for the first commercial long duration storage that can go for, I think it's 10 hours. And what you do is you actually liquefy the air. You take the surplus renewable energy that at the moment is being dumped and lost, and you compress it using that surplus green electricity into a liquid which you store in a tank. And when you need backup, you know, like when you're watching the World Cup and everyone turns the kettle on to make tea, right? That's an old-fashioned analogy of when you get at peak demand, is that you then just release the liquid air, and it just expands 750 times, turns a turbine, generates electricity, and that's your backup long-duration energy storage, right? There's so much creativity going on, and that's why I wanted to say that I think one of the issues here is, and it's good to have this meeting, is, are we communicating how exciting, well, also challenging, and also the risks, how scary the risks are, but also how exciting the world would be if we can get this right? Because it strikes me that a lot of what the Commission's doing, and there is so much the Commission's doing, is so lost to the average person, maybe captured in acronyms, or we were talking about acronyms earlier, weren't we, Yvonne? I mean, I did a show from the International Energy thing last year on a Horizon project in Europe with 10 universities, 2 private sector companies, blah, blah, blah. They've been developed and tested and proved an industrial heat pump. Nobody gets excited about industrial heat pumps today, but I got excited, that can actually turn minus 20 degree water or minus 30 degree water into 150 plus degrees of temperature within seconds, which potentially could cut industrial emissions in Europe by 20%. The question is, who knows this? And how do you get it out into the marketplace in a way that actually then it gives you that impact within the clean industrial deal? Sorry, I'm talking about communication in a world of disinformation. There's a lot to be proud of what the European project is doing, right? We're doing it here, but how do we make it work? Communication. Yvonne.
May I jump in?
Yes.
Because I loved your picture about the black swans.
The picture of the black swans?
Yeah, I don't like black swans, but what we have currently is a black swan lake, thanks to Trump. And how can we create the swan lake with the white swans again? Mm-hmm. How do we do that? And that now I come back to my thesis that we need to create European publics. And that's why I'm fond of the European Climate Pact that much. Because we have to learn about those cases which make us proud, which you should scale up. Mm-hmm. What we can learn from each other, Natacha, as you said, we have to open up the dialogues, because I think that the transition in which we are in is Europe's most important peace, partnership and resilience project. And partnership only goes together with the people, so we have to talk with the people themselves. Mm-hmm. And come back to citizenship. We are all Europeans, and we have all the potential to bring out the message of today, where Europe is so often bashed and Brussels is the bad guy in the game. But I didn't hear a single bad word from, sorry, I have to look at the notes again what her name was, but Barbara Gessler, talking about the effort, and the European Commission is clear about the vision. So we have to bring it out, or what you said, Natacha, about staying to the vision. So we have to multiply that message as well, mm-hmm. and really bring down the bad messaging about the European bureaucracy, which is a monster. Is it really a monster? it's rules-based policy making. And I always experience Brussels policy making to be so transparent, so maybe you are overwhelmed by the texts and potential to get involved and have your say and everything, but really going in where your heart is and investing into those topics and not nourishing the monster of bad feelings about the transition kicking us out of competitiveness. It's quite the opposite. We have to take the opportunities in the transition and raising European visions with real practical systemic changes, small steps, step by step in company level, also on community level, but bringing together the experiences and then make the big ones to make of positive impacts. That is what I would like to see.
And Chris, do you feel your voice as a scientist is heard enough in the corridors of power?
Well, with the climate issue, we see, of course, a very strong decline in interest. That's just happening. It happens across all levels. And I mean, you know, I do a lot of natural impacts, so bread and butter science, let's say. Whenever it burns, you know, then people come and ask me about fire, because that's, you know, in the news and so on. But we are not most worried about fire. I mean, we are worried, but I will tell you later. So they don't really bother about the other maybe things that are worse. And I think what we've learned in this Cascades project that I was telling you about earlier, that was actually quite interesting, because we had a very strong stakeholder engagement and a lot of policy simulations with very fancy outreach methods and so on. And maybe to put it very easy, so before we were always poised to be as simple as possible. And we realized this doesn't work. We have to embrace the complexity. And actually the people who were there, who were experts, from the DGs, from industries, from businesses, they actually know their stuff very well. And what lacks a bit, of course, is this integration. That's what they then ask science for. But embracing this complexity and acknowledging that there's no single person who knows it all. Yeah? I mean, you put me here as a scientist, I cannot answer most of the questions. And to realize this, I can answer some very specific technical questions. That's my expertise. But all of you have complementary expertises that we need. And that's very complex, unfortunately, although it's great. Yeah? It's, of course, a great thing, but it's not so easy. So embracing the complexity in communication, as well in the stuff that we do, not to, let's say, be too simple, and that gets too easily populistic. And you know.
Yeah. Natacha, do you feel you're bashed a lot with... We're talking about bashing the Commission. We're not bashing the Commission here. We're actually full on in support of the Commission. But is it a challenge to get your message out to the public?
I think there's a growing effort to balance confidence in knowing, you know, we are confident in what we are trying to propose and what we represent in terms of values, in terms of believing scientists and believing that decarbonization can really play a role in achieving some of our other economic objectives, and being humble and listening and also learning from, you know, I was talking about what we're doing on seeing how localities and regions are approaching some of these questions. It's also balancing. It is complex. The European Union is very complex. It's a democratic process. Everything we propose is probably hundreds of pages long, because it's already a balance of proposals. I don't think that's the most beautiful thing to communicate, but that's also how we work, and that's what we're trying to find a balance in. So being self-assured, and I think there's a lot of discussion on, you know, is Europe a geopolitical actor, and, you know, can we be resilient, and do we know what we're doing, and do we have the creativity and innovation here to build the markets of tomorrow? But at the same time, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers either, and that I don't want this to be lost in translation. We have ideas of how we want to go about things, but we also want to learn from each other. We don't want to claim that, you know, one energy mix is the right one. We need to find this balance. So I think that's a little bit maybe where the challenge is, but yeah, I mean, bashing.
Good. I think we are at the end of this. Thank you very much indeed to all my three wonderful guests. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you to you.
There is no alternative to what you're doing. The science and the science of economics as well tells us that we need to decarbonize our economy to hand over a safe and livable planet to the next generation. It's as simple as that. And I want to thank Isabel Ahrens.
Thank you, Nick.
For organizing all this and for inviting us. Well done, congratulations. And to everybody here who actually has found the time to be with us. Well done.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the panelists. That was great. Just stay with us here now, and also Nick, you. Fantastic, super insightful, and you can watch it later and share it as well on We Don't Have Time. And this will be a great moment to maybe, get more visibility to this topic and share it all across. All together we can make such a difference, but right now we want to make a picture. So please, it's now the moment for the first group picture. And please, for everyone who's here right now, come to the front, come on stage, stand before, get yourself ready. There's Rodrigo coming with the baby now. Oh. Welcome, hello. Anna and Rodrigo, it's too loud now.
Okay.
She just fell asleep.
That's who we're talking about.
Well,
the next generation.
So we make a silent picture, as silent as possible. Come over to the stage and...
Come, people can come on the stage. Come on, this is... No. Oh, good, thank you very much. Where are you from?
I'm originally Egyptian, but I'm living here for 11 years.
Ah, okay, all right. Okay. Yes, many times. Andak bira men fadlek. Mafish bira henna. I know. No. I've been there many times in the 80s on holiday, and but then also I worked for the UN for 17 years, so I was in Cairo and also Sharm el Sheikh and
it's not Egyptian.
No, I know, that's true, but they seem to organize a lot of their conferences there, don't they? Yeah, because they can control the security.
They close it.
Yeah, that's true. Should we move forward, or what do we do like this? There's like a big gap here, isn't there? But these are for the previous generation that have moved on. We have the next generation, us and the previous.
Just look at the camera, not on me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Will you bow there? Just look at it, and if you can see the camera, it can't see you. So, okay? Look, fine, yeah.
Have you got film in that camera?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Maybe it is. It was something my father always used to say. Have you got film in that camera? Good. Well done. Very nice to meet you. Do you have a card or anything? Or?
I didn't bring my card.
Okay, but Isabel will have.
So, before we all have lunch, we have a short session. Please have a seat. Please have a seat again. So before we move on, I would like to introduce you someone who is new in this room. We will get there soon. Please have a seat again. We have one short session, and then we go for lunch, I promise. And you have a longer networking time. So Tobias Maaßen, you are already on stage. Would you like to say a few words to the ambassadors and partners? Just from my side, Tobias Maaßen is from the European Commission representation here in Berlin for Germany, and he's basically the one I'm communicating with, and who's inviting, for example, the right speakers together on stage. He's the one who's informed about what's going on with the European Climate Pact here in Germany, and he started in November, and I'm very happy that you're here today, and thank you so much for collaborating.
Thank you. And I didn't plan to be on stage. All I wanted to say, I told Barbara earlier to tell
get the email anyway with all of that, big ones. We will get there in the afternoon. I'm super excited for that one. But before we get to the lunch and to the afternoon part, where it's much more about us connecting, sharing, and so on, I want to have the chance here right now to introduce you to a few more people who are inside this room and organizations